The Play is the Thing, with your host, Judy Sleed. I call her Mom, and she's going to call this guy Bob. His name is Robert Kalfin. He's today's guest. Take it away, Judy.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I'm so happy to have Bob here as my guest. Hi, Bob.
It's mutual. I'm delighted to do this, and I'm so glad I've met you.
Yes, and you're in showbiz, one of my favorite subjects, showbiz.
Okay. Actually, I'm in theater. That's what I am in. Okay.
In theater, you don't call that showbiz?
Well, it is, but I don't want to confuse it with the entertainment industry, because theater for me has the same cultural role as opera or ballet or symphony in terms of society and what it gives to people. So it's about entertainment and fun, and you can be funny and silly, but it's always about having a cultural role, the same as the opera or the ballet in terms of what an audience experiences.
And what is your function? I mean, since you made it so explicit, like, it's not this and that. What is your function?
I'm a theater director.
Director.
And I've been an artistic director of 3 theaters over my career. I had my own theater in New York for 17 years, which became rather famous with many plays, transferring to off-Broadway and Broadway productions, some of them very famous productions. So that's my career,
And my ears perked up when you said artistic director, because
Yes.
I had a friend who was an artistic director. His name was Bill Hunt.
I don't know the name, but was he a theater artistic director?
Well, he had, he directed a theater. It was called Tinker's Pond Theater, which is no longer. And
Right.
I went to
Was that in New York?
it was out here on the island.
Oh, I see.
And he had Edward Everett Horton on and
Oh, that's
among,
a great
it
talent.
was many years ago.
Right, that's a great talent, that man. Okay.
So an artistic director is different from a director?
Basically, an artistic director is the head of an institution, choosing the plays that the theater is doing over a season of plays, 4 or 5 plays a year with a subscription audience, and they choose the plays, and they are the artistic management with a point of view in particular about the work that they think is important, it should be seen and heard. And I have been artistic director of 3 theaters. As I said, the one in New York for over 17 years, which was located at BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, for 9 years, and then also played in Manhattan, where we had a theater as well. And the other theaters were Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, and a theater down in Sanibel Island in Florida. So I've run 3 theaters. What it is the artistic vision for the theater of what work should be done and what they feel should be seen and why it's important to do a play. And I'm primarily involved with new plays and working with writers on new work, though I love doing the classics because then I know the play works. It's my fault if it doesn't work, But at the moment, I work freelance as a director, and I love what I do, and I'm in the middle of countless projects. I have shelves of plays that I would love to get on the stage, but these days it has become, with cutbacks in funding, it's come mostly about money raising to get works on. And this is in the not-for-profit theater world. This is not about commercial investment. This is about plays that you put on because you think they need to be seen and heard. And so I'm in the midst. I did 2 of those last season off Broadway, and I could tell you what they were. And I have one that I'm working on right this moment, which we're hoping to get on the boards by June. We're in the fundraising stage.
So nowadays, I imagine it's very different than what it used to be years ago to
Yes.
put on a play. It used to be easier, would you say, for a new playwright to?
Well, I happen to have born at a time when I grew into the world of the late 60s and 1970s, where the idea of not-for-profit theater and doing seasons of plays with a subscription audience was new. And you would have audiences who would pay up front, like for the ballet or the opera or the symphony, and you'd have money to produce a season, and we were very, very, very wonderfully supported by the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the City of New York, the Borough of Brooklyn, the Borough Cultural this and Cultural that. And so the funding was, at that point, really there was a kind of an excitement in the air, and we were supported about doing whatever we wanted to do. And as I said, we mostly do new works and introduce new plays or revive things that were very important. And one of the things I'm very proud of that we revived, because it was done by someone I love named Hal Prince, who recently passed away.
Hal Prince, I remember that name.
Hal Prince recently passed away, and I talked him into reviving the wonderful Leonard Bernstein musical Candide, which had been a huge flop when it was originally done. And as a director myself, I say, there's a way to do that work, and I have an idea. And I introduced Hal Prince to a wonderful set designer who had also a vision of how to do that play, because it was very difficult in terms of its...
So it makes a difference when a different director sees a play, you put their personality, and it just comes out differently.
Well, you have a vision, but basically the job of a director, and I'm in the middle of just finishing my book about this, the director's job is to help communicate the playwright's vision so an audience gets it. And you use all the tools of your craft, lighting, music, sound, costumes, the whole visual concept of what it looks like, and that's the work, that's the delicious work that one does. And thank God I was trained in every aspect of my profession, because I went
You were trained in a special school?
I went to the Yale School of Drama, where I got my Master of Fine Arts, but I had to do lighting, I had to do sound, I had to do music, I had to design costumes, I had to design scenery, and I also had to work in the shops and help make them and build them, so I knew what everybody had to do.
Where are you from?
I was born in the Bronx.
In the Bronx,
I was
yes,
born
and you went to school there?
My first to eighth grade was in the Bronx public school, but then I was very lucky to be accepted by the High School of Music and Art in Manhattan, which is now part of the Performing Arts High School, LaGuardia, and I was a music major at that point.
You play an instrument?
I played the piano when I got into school, and I ended up playing string bass fiddle, and I ended playing up in amateur symphony orchestras when I was in my high school years.
My goodness, I think we could do 2-3 shows with you. You're so there's so many different avenues that you have. I wanted to ask you, your parents were in the theater?
No.
Where did you get this talent? I'm trying to figure out. Where does it come from?
The source of talent in my family, which is like a volcano, is my grandmother.
Your grandmother?
Who came here from Russia, of course, in 1904, talking about the hot new Russian playwright named Chekhov.
Wow.
Okay? And my grandmother was a fountain of creativity. She wrote poetry that was published in the Yiddish Daily Forward. She was a singer. She would have soirees every Sunday where you were not invited.
Do you have a picture of her?
I don't have it with me, but yes, I do. Yes,
I'd love to
it's
see
in
it.
my. It's in my. And she would have soirees every Sunday afternoon where you were not invited unless you wrote something or performed something. You had to produce, and she had this Sunday performing just array. You didn't have to necessarily write something; you could perform something musically. So, and she sang with the Workman's Circle Chorus, as well as writing poetry.
And you remember her well?
Oh yes, and I see through 5 generations of my family that talent, not only as a continuous line, but growing and burgeoning in its creativity through my nephews and nieces and my cousins, and it's like a line. Her children, one was a playwright who wrote radio plays and who designed scenery for the theater, and the other was a musician who was a member, played in a mandolin orchestra, and my mother was a kindergarten teacher, but very creative. I could tell you a story about my mother, which I love, if you want to hear it, very short. She had a kid in her kindergarten who seemed to be interested in music, and she brought him to the piano and she painted the keys in different colors. No, this is not my mother. This is my sister. My sister did this. She worked with gifted children. Anyway,
I
my
was
sister.
just going to ask you if you have siblings.
Yeah, my sister was a school teacher with young kids. My mother was a kindergarten teacher, and so was my sister. But my sister, also with all this creativity, there was a kid in her class who was interested in music and drawn to the piano. She painted the piano keys in all different colors, and then put a piece of music and painted the different notes in those colors, and the kids started relating the notes on the piano to the music page. And I mean, this is my whole family. My cousin produces plays in Hebrew in Massachusetts, musicals which she writes or arranges the music, designs the scenery, directs the plays, directs it, and she's also brilliantly talented. This is through my whole family, but there's also a scientific part of my family, which is interesting too, in my sister's children, which are all into environmental issues, and creatively, my nephew is saving all the salmon and coming back upstream throughout the country, tearing down the dams in Maine, and he's kind of well known. And my niece, who lives in Brooklyn, has written many books on the environment, and she's often on NPR and on TV. So there's this whole thing of science and nature and the environment.
A very talented family.
Huh?
Very talented
Yes.
family. And just out of curiosity, do you have any outstanding
Bills?
memory?
No. What?
No, an entertainer that you have a favorite entertainer or most memorable that you were in contact with?
I've worked with a lot of very, very famous people. And the one that people always ask me about is Meryl Streep, who I engaged when she first got out of drama school, and she
You
played.
were engaged to her?
Huh?
Did you?
I engaged her to
You
work
were
for me.
not engaged
I didn't get engaged to her. No, I hired her. I hired her to work in the Bertolt Brecht musical Happy End, which she had done in the drama school, and I brought her into that, and the show transferred to Broadway, and Meryl was on Broadway in this leading role when she just got out of the Yale Drama School, and she was a pleasure to work with.
Did you exchange postcards with her?
Not really, not really. We both, went our ways, but she's a
Yes.
wonderful human being and a solid mensch. She's
She
a
won
pleasure.
many awards.
Oh yeah, and she's a pleasure to work with. She's a really great person, a good human being, and that's what I'm about. Okay.
Yes, and
that's what I prefer to work with.
And on the way here, we were talking about Gypsy.
Oh,
you
yes.
had some interesting comment about that.
Oh yes, I met. It may have been through Hal Prince, actually. I met June Havok, famous movie actress and wonderfully talented playwright herself.
She was a playwright?
Brilliant. She wrote a play about those dance things in the 1920s when you danced until you dropped. She wrote a play about that. Marathon 33 was the name of that. And she had another new play which she wanted me to look at, and she was gorgeous. Even in her 80s, she was stunningly beautiful. And I was to dinner.
Just like me.
Just like you. And I was to dinner at her house in Connecticut, where she also had a farm where she saved animals that needed to be saved. A wonderful woman, June Havok. And I was delighted to have her for a time in my life. I never got to do one of her plays because the way times have changed in the theater now in particular, unless something has a very, very small amount of actors, I'm talking about the nonprofit theater world in particular, it's very hard to get a play produced. They say if it has more than 5 actors in it, we can't do it. It's too much money. And in fact, I was on the phone last night with a playwright of the work I'm working on right now with a writer, and he said, I figured a way to cut the number of actors down from 8 to 6. I did a rewrite. I'm sending it to you in the morning. Maybe it will help to raise the money if it's a less money. Because when people don't understand what the money goes for is actor salaries, designer salaries, theater rental, publicity, everything. So, and most of these small nonprofit theaters, they are limited by the unions to a certain amount of seats, 99 seats or 199, depending on what contract you're on and how much people get paid. And it's all codified. It's all set in stone. You can't juggle it.
So you not only have to be a playwright, you have to be a business person.
You have to be a salesman.
Yes.
I just came back recently from a big fundraising dinner in Washington because this playwright who I'm working with now, who's a major physician in research and in science, by the way, and well known in that world, he's written 3 plays, all of which I love. And this is the second playwright I'm working with who is also a doctor. And it goes with the profession sometimes because there's a view of humanity when you're being a doctor where you see certain things. And he wrote a play that I'm interested in about Chekhov, and Chekhov was also a doctor.
Really?
Chekhov was a doctor.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. And he wrote a play about Chekhov, which
you
I'm also
mean he
interested.
made a living as a doctor, or he made a living as a playwright?
Well, he began to make a living as a playwright, and not only a playwright, as a novelist and short story writer in particular. But he wrote a play about Chekhov when he was 30 years old, going to the island of Sakhalin off the coast of Siberia, where he visited the prison there and experienced how they were being treated. And he went to volunteer as a young doctor, idealistically, and he wrote a play. This play, by the guy I'm working with now, is about Chekhov's experience doing that and how it changed his writing and future. But the play I'm dealing now has nothing to do with that. The play I'm dealing with now is about a kind of unknown American hero, and I think you've heard me talk about it before. And I'm very interested in it, and I can tell you more about it if you want.
So. It's a very silly question, I think, about like from the time a play is finished and to like stage it. It takes many months, sometimes years.
The play, the big play I did last season took 6 years for me to get onto the boards. But that was also during a developmental period where we kept looking at it. We would have readings and have audience to come and get reaction and go back and rewrite and make changes depending on what we learned from the audience.
So if I was going to give you a play now and say I would like you to produce it, by the time you have it done, I'll be long gone.
Well, I'm not a producer. I'm not a producer. I'm not an artistic director either anymore. I am a freelance director, so I am in the position of having to raise the money if there's something that interests me. So I'm mostly running around being like a marriage broker and finding people who would be interested in the subject and willing to help get it on the board and be seen. Like the play that I'm doing right now, I was at a very big fundraising dinner in Washington because it's a very important work, this one I'm working on, and nobody knows this American history. And there is a whole wing dedicated to the person who was the subject of this play in Washington in the Naval Academy, with a whole wing dedicated to him. And his story is called The American Dreyfus Case. And if I have a minute, I'll tell you what it's about. His name was Uriah Levy. And the play came about because the playwright was visiting Monticello in the Jefferson's home, and he saw a grave behind the house with the name of a Jewish woman who was buried there, Rachel Levy. And it had the Hebrew date of when she lived and when she died. And they said, "Who is this? What's she doing here?" And her son, Uriah Levy, this play is about, bought Monticello when it was falling to the ground at the urge of Lafayette and restored it completely and got back as much of Jefferson's furniture, which had been auctioned off, and restored the whole thing. It fell into disrepair after Uriah Levy died, and then his nephew bought it again and restored it again. That's only part of the story. Mm-hmm. This man was a hero in the American Navy. He established the United States Naval Academy. He abolished the wicked practice of flogging sailors in the American Navy, which came from the British. And he was court-martialed 6 times, or he was brought up on charges dealing with anti-Semitism, because he rose so high through the ranks that there was resentment. And every time he'd apply for his next commission, they would try to deny him because he was Jewish. And the play was his final appeal to Congress. He was being denied once again. He was an admiral. And this is the 1850s I'm talking about.
Okay, now we are talking about like Broadway, which is the plays have to be, but there are so many other plays, so many other places throughout the country where they have small theaters and there's television that you could, do you think that new playwrights would have a chance to aim for a smaller scale where the plays could be produced?
You're talking about the regional not-for-profit theaters, where, by the way, nowadays most of the new plays that even come to Broadway are first started in these not-for-profit funded theaters like Manhattan Theater Club, Playwrights Horizons.
Did you ever hear of the New Moon? I think it's called New Moon.
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
Connecticut someplace.
Yes. There are many, and these are theaters that are part of the movement that happened in the late 60s and early 70s when the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation funded 11 new theaters in America to decentralize the American theater, so they weren't only getting Broadway tours on the way into New York, on the way out, or out of, after they played in New York.
So we have like 3 minutes to tell the
all right, well, I talk too much, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Very informative and everything.
I want to just answer your question quickly. You can submit a play, but it's important to find out what their mandate is. What are they interested in? What is the subject of material of things they want to bring to their audience? What is the artistic vision of these theaters? And if your play relates to their vision of what they're about, you may have a chance. It'll go to someone who will read it, who may go to someone else who will read it, and it may never get to the artistic director. But if somebody reads it and says, hey, this is really relates to why we exist, we should have a look at this play. That's how it can happen.
So there is new hope.
There's always hope because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
It is. So what do you envision? What do you if you could sum it up in a sentence, what else would you like to do?
for me,
Yes.
I just want to keep bringing the works that I believe in to life.
Oh.
And I have so many that I know are extraordinary works by writers, and I believe in them, and I devote my time and my energy to trying to make them happen.
So that's great.
And I've been doing it for 60 years.
Wow.
Okay.
And
Okay.
we hope you're going to do it for another 60.
Your mouth to God's ears, as they say.
I like your the way you think that when you think that maybe, first of all, you said we met, it was by chance that you and I met, and there must be a reason.
Nothing happens by chance.
No, you said there must be a reason. That's
Yes,
your thing,
yes.
and I love that. You always
no.
say, I heard you say that more than once, when something didn't happen, and you said, there must be a reason.
And you later find out what it was. And sometimes there's something you want desperately and it doesn't happen. And many times later you say, thank God that didn't happen. Because if that had happened, this would not have happened.
Right.
And it's a healthy way to live.
And I would like to thank JCOH for funding this show, and Daniel, and my son Jeff, and of course Bob, to be as my guest. And
I love doing this. Thank you.
and I'm so happy that we met and we were able to share this. I like your philosophy, and you're a wonderful person.
Oh, that's very sweet of you. You're not so bad yourself.